All right. So deformers. So we've done these guys, all our NURBs, generators, or whatever. Now we're going to do deformers, which actually change, sort of like an SSD does. A subdivision does change your object, but this will do the same thing. So let's just put a cube in here. And on the Y, let's make it 600. So it's nice and tall. And we're going to go with a bend. Let's just talk about a bend deformer. So when you create a bend deformer, it used to be you would have to scale this thing up and match it. But what a bend does is it bends things. So think of this little purple bit as just the cage that is whatever's in that cage gets affected. So if we go ahead and go to our bend, we can look at our options. The big one is keep y-axis length. That's kind of a big one. But right now it won't make a difference because we have to drag it underneath our cube. So drag your bend, make it a child of the cube, and now it'll affect the cube. And the strength of the bend, so if we do this, we can see the bend bends, but the cube doesn't. And this was what I was talking about with subdivisions. When you create a cube from scratch, there's no subdivisions in there. So if I turn off my bend and we see our cube again, I'm going to go up to Display, Garage Shading, so I can see my lines. There's no subdivisions. So what we can do then is go ahead and crank that up. So in our Y, we definitely need some. So let's go to maybe 10. And we can throw a couple more. Let's go 8 and 8 on these. So back to our guy. So once you subdivide this guy, now if we turn our bend on, it bends. And right now, since that bend is just in that area, it'll bend just within that range. So the thing that's weird is you always have to remember that it's thinking, though, about the position of your unbent cube. So if you are moving things around, so if you wanted to bend this further up, you wouldn't try and move this over here. You just move it up. Oops, I want the bend alone. So if we move the bend up, you can see we just get it. Now, this keep y-axis length, this is where this comes into play. It'll automatically just sort of evenly try and just like it'll sort of spread these out to create a nice smooth curve. If you don't have that checked. If you have it checked, it will make sure from this point to this point is the same length as it was before you bent it. You know, so if you want, you can animate this. You can have little cubes waving. And then angle is also like, so you can say where the angle is that it bends. So you could rotate it around. And again, anything with a dot can be animated. So a lot of times bends can come in handy, like the piece of paper you had, like she needed a corner bent, so you can just have a bend kind of slide in and do that. Now a lot of times you'll want the whole thing bent. So if you do fit to parent, it automatically now, if we turn it off, stretched out to get to that point. So I'm going to turn mine off so that we can see, zero these out. So when we had our one bend on there, just delete and put a new bend on. If you have this y-axis length, but there's also limited, within box, and unlimited. So if we look at our bend here, and I bring it down smaller again, so let's do 200. So with limited, it just sort of applies to the whole thing. With within box, it only applies inside the box, so it's not even going to care. Like this is now like, I don't care, I'm outside the box, I'm not paying attention. And then unlimited will do the entire thing.
Why is that even a feature?
Because sometimes you might need it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Take your word for it.
So if we did this guy and maybe just brought him down low, and then we created another one.
The movement of the bed, like something's traveling through something makes the noise just be.
Yeah. So we grabbed another one and put it in here. Now that's where we have to line it up, and it's just crazy. So rotate it 90 degrees, and we get it in there, but you have to remember that it's got to be lined up with the other one. So see if I move it out of there. Whoa. So that bend let me turn off. I wonder if I can. So you can see those two bends.
Did you shrink it down from 1,000?
Hmm.
Did you shrink it down from 1,000?
The cube?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I don't remember. Yeah, it's a 600 now. But I could take it to 1,000.
No, I just trying.
So it's just, I want to show you that it's kind of crazy when you're doing that. So these guys are both in the limited mode. If you do 2 unlimited, it's just going to be a mess. So using a lot of bends can be a pain in the butt. But you can, sometimes you can almost, well, why wouldn't you just do a sweep with a rectangular? If you needed this shape, could you do a sweep with draw your spline and do a rectangular spline to sweep along? Sure. Could you box model this by extruding and rotating and extruding and rotating? Yep. So it just depends on what you're doing. So a lot of times people will do bends to create a lot of stuff. And then if you want to, you can always make it editable. So you have make editable, and then you have current state to object. So if you're using deformers, current state to object will give you a new one. You can get rid of your old one, and now it's just polygons. So it's just a weird thing. But we're going to do something now that sort of makes sense to use all these guys. But just to show you that, some of the other ones we can do, I'm just going to go throw another cube in. And these are things you just need to play with to get the feel for them. And we'll do 10, 10, 10 on my segments. And so just a couple of the others. So a bulge, same thing. You can imagine what it's going to do. We have a strength, make it a child, and you can bulge things out. Now you can always throw these into a subdivision surface too. If it's a little rough, if you want that to do your subdividing for you, you can go that route. So you can have a lower poly that'll go for you. You can also put multiple things on here. So if you did want to do a bend with a bulge, we could take our bend, but it goes in the order of how you put them in. So we want to bend before we bulge. So if we do the bend, I know it's crazy, do the bend, I'm going to make it fit to parent, and now give it some strength. We're getting that. So that's a bend before a bulge. But if we bulge before we bend, so weird, right? Okay. And if we fit the parent on that, you can see now it's the whole thing. And if you had, like, if you were doing like a lung animation or something, and you needed like something like that roll in, who knows? Who knows what you could do? So they're handy, but they're tricky. I guess that's what I'm trying to tell you. So, all right, we're going to do a little vase, like a cool artsy vase. So let's do a cylinder. We're going to use an FFD in this. We're going to use a FFD and a twist. All right, so we're going to do a cylinder, and let's do bevel it. So we'll do a cylinder at, I think I even wrote down, did I write down? No, so we'll just leave it where it is. So let's do, we're going to put this in the subdivision surface, so we don't need a lot of crazy things. So let's go on our height segments. Let's take it up to 8. And let's go to our display options so we can see our lines popping in. So a cylinder with 8 height segments. And then let's take it down to 16 rotations. That'll give us some room to move. And let's go ahead and put on our caps. Click on your caps. We want to get a little, I don't know why, some are fillets and some are bevels and some are roundings, but it's just the way it is. So let's turn our fillets on. Maybe take that up to, maybe have that, so 10 maybe. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's cool. And then we're going to cut this top off. So we're going to go ahead and, we just want the bottom to be rounded for our base. So in 5 segments, let's take it down to, yeah, that's 4. 4 sounds good. Again, sometimes you're just, like, you're fudging it along. You're like, what looks good? And this is it, because you're not creating engineering documents here. You're just trying to create what's going to look great for you. We round this guy, and we're going to go ahead and I think this is fine. We'll make it editable. So C, or click on this guy up here. And now we're going to chop off the top. So I'm going to go into my front view. We're going to use a marquee selection up here. So instead of this one, we'll go to rectangular selection. Turn off our, go into points mode, sorry, points mode. Turn off our only select visible objects or elements. And now I'm going to select all these guys, not the top row, or not the first row here, but just the rounded bits. So we still leave that top row there. So let me zoom in. So just get these guys.
How did you get the rectangular
Right up here. Hold down on selection. And second one down. So, and then turn off, make sure you turn off only select visible elements. Grab those points, and then delete them. What we're going to do is create a FFD, which is a free form deformation. So that's a deformer there. And we'll drag this guy down into our cylinder. And these are really cool. They're kind of fun. So let's go ahead and fit to parent. So I've got my FFD selected, which I picked up here with my deformers. FFD. And then drag it as a child into our cylinder with the top cut off. And on the FFD, we can go ahead and fit to parent, so it's right up on there. And we're going to need a couple more segments on this guy. So let's go ahead and grid points on the Y. Let's take it up to, let's do 6. That looks good. Now the cool thing about an FFD, so just think about it, sort of like when we were on a subdivision surface, we could move our points around and they would curve. So it's sort of the same thing here. So if you do your, we can't do a loop selection unfortunately, but we can go ahead and grab, we'll just stay in this mode. So if we do a marquee selection, like we had before, with our only select visible off, we can go ahead and grab a loop of these guys, and I always just check. And then if we scale this, it sort of like becomes a bulge. Now you can also just grab one and move it around and start deforming that way. So your geometry isn't changing. I mean, it's affecting through this. So this is just kind of like it's a free-form deformation. So if you needed to put a spout on something, really easy, you could do that. But it stays pretty soft. So I'm going to undo those top 2 point moves and just go back to my center. And so then I'm going to go, let me select the next row down and kind of scale that T, and I'm just going to click out here and drag. So get a little bulge happening there. And then I'll take T, take the next one. And remember your shift key will switch between your last 2 objects or tools you used. So I'm going to scale that one in a little just so we get a little better base. And I'll hit space to go back to my select, grab this, and let's scale that out a little so we get a cool form. And let's go to the top one and let's move this a little. So grab the top, just make sure I have them all. And I'm going to just grab on its x-axis, bring this over. Now you'll start getting some weird shearing, so at this point you're going to want to also start to rotate. So if we just hit rotate and rotate it on the blue, now we can start getting some cool vibe there. Maybe move it up a little. And maybe want to take that next row down and sort of do an in-between rotation just to even it out. Because that's the thing, you want to try, even when you're doing something like this, you want to try and make it as close to the curve of what you're trying to create as possible. So if I select this this lower row down here, I think I got a top one there. And make sure. Yep. And we rotate that guy. So there we go. See how that just looks a lot nicer and cleaner? So and that's just topology. So you want things to be as smooth as possible. Whenever you have a really rough transition between polygons, that's when it can get kind of weird for you. And so maybe we'll even scoot that guy over just a hair to ease into this groovy little guy. And let me go to my top again. Now since I'm rotated, we could go to do a lasso selection. Same thing, make sure it only turns off, and then you can click and drag to get your points that way since we're at a weird angle. So I've got those. Maybe I'll scale in my top just a little and rotate it a little. Let's get a little cooler. So it's sort of a gourd shape. I don't know. But that's a fancy vase. Yeah, all right. So now what's cool about it, again, we turn it off. It's still the same if we turn off our FFD. We just have that. If we render, we get this cool shape. So now what we want to do, now this one though, we can't change our, it's not like a subdivision surface where you can say, oh, crank up the subdivisions. It's going to use the geometry you have. So we'll put it in a subdivision surface in a minute. So let's also put a little twist on this guy. So let's create another deformer, and it's a twist. Where's it at? Over here. And drag that down under the cylinder. And I'm going to turn off my FFD for a minute just so we can see how the twist works. So I'm actually going to hide it. I'm going to click the red button just so it's not confusing when we see it. And on the twist, it's a child of the cylinder. Let's go ahead and fit to parent on that too. And all it has is an angle, so we'll just angle this guy. So let's maybe take it up 100 degrees. Rotation sounds good. So what's cool about that now is if you were going to try, and even if you were going to try and create, if you wanted to have spiral lines going up like this on an object, with polygons like this, you can't do it. You would have to get into a much tighter range. See what I mean? Because you would go like 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah, it's like a stair step, right? It's just like pixels. So, but if you did your twist and then you made it editable, then you could get into that vibe of getting those guys going. Or if you took your cylinder, took one row, and I'm going to undo this so you don't have to do it. Oops, sorry. Select. And then we took an extrude on that, and then turn our twist back on. Then you can see how you can start getting your cool little fin. You could get fins and things rolling. So that's where you start thinking like, oh, this is going to be really hard to create. What could I do to do it? Then you make it editable. Then you can move on from there. So we're not going to do that though. But we're going to do something similar. All right, so we've got our twist. It's on there. And what we want to do though is it doesn't, if we turn on our FFD, so since it's second, we're getting a twist and an FFD, which is cool. That'd be a really complex shape to make. But we're not really getting much benefit out of the twist. We're seeing a little in these facets, but we want to get something on there, a little detail maybe to pop out. So let's go back to our cylinder, and I'm just going to hide these so they're not in our way and they don't bug us. And we could do, let's see, what's a couple ways we could probably do this. But let's go ahead and use the knife tool. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my edge mode. Oh, I guess it doesn't really matter. We can go to points mode. And we're going to go ahead and do cuts on this thing. And it's going to be a little meticulous, but it's just sort of sometimes it's a pain in the butt. So we'll go to hit K for knife tool or right click to knife. And we're going to do on our options a loop. And the way the loop works, so you can see our little guideline, if you're on an edge in the middle, it'll loop that way. If you're on an edge here, it'll go around that way. So if you need more subdivision, you can always go in there and click. But what we're going to do is we're going to do some edge loops. And you can see if we go on this top row, we get it from top to top and along the bottom. So we're going to have to click this like 16 times, I guess. But so what we're going to do is and we're just eyeballing this one. So go close to your line, click once, see we get a cut. Then go to the other side of the line, click again, and we get another one. So let's do that all the way around. Well, you only have to do it halfway around because it's on the other side for you. But what this is doing, just so when we put this in a subdivision surface, this is going to cause little sharper edges, right? Because think about when we did our wheel. When we added geometry, it's no longer smooth. So knife tool with a loop, 1, 2, Again, we're just eyeballing this. We're not, and you could set this by the offset percent if we needed to be precise, but we don't need to. We're just making pretty pictures. 1, 2, rotate around. Getting close. It's going to be worth it, I promise. You're going to have the most beautiful vase. Oh, that one's wide, darn it. Okay, so once you get all of them done, if we go back and turn on our, unhide our deformers, look at that craziness. Woo! Holy cow. I'll buy that out of a catalog. All right, so it's still a little faceted down here, so this is when we'll add our SSD in. And that would be the top. Now, oh, that's the stuff. Okay, but we're still we don't have any thickness to it, right? So we're kind of like, you know, if someone was looking at it over here, it's like, wow, that's going to be, what's it made out of, paper? What's going on here? This is weird. So we need some thickness to it. You could do some things as far as, there's a couple things we could do. And I'm going to turn off these guys, are deformers. Will this work? Turn off our subdivision surface. So there's a couple ways we could do it. I'm going to hide. I hate seeing all these things. Oh, what we can do, in filter, we can turn off, I think it's generator. Nope, it's not generator. Filter, deformer, there we go. Turn off deformers, and you don't see them. So that's a nice thing. So we don't see those cages, and you can always turn those on. So filter, you can hide things you don't want to see. When you start getting a lot of lights and a lot of cameras in your scenes, you'll start turning them off. Because once you have them set and they're fine, you just see them all the time, and it makes you crazy. All right. So there's a couple things we could do. One thing you could do, when we extruded polygons, we can also extrude edges. So if we went to our edge mode and our selection mode and went to our cylinder, so my select, again, is too big. So I'm going to bring that down. And you can, is it command? No, I guess it's not going to do it for me. Thought you could double click. That's okay. So let's do a loop select, which is not there, UL. And you can grab this top selection, and you can do an extrude on an edge. So if we do an extrude and we click and drag, okay, so it's going to go up or down at this point because there's no real direction. So once you still have it selected though, so you extrude once, in your options over here, there's a edge angle. So if you grab that, it's the angle at which it extrudes. So if you wanted it to go in -90, then you've got that. So then you could fake it if you wanted. You could extrude again. So I'll go extrude, and then click and drag down. And I could get down to a point, and then I could close polygon hole. Did it do it? Yes, no. It didn't do it, did it? No, undo. But I would never do it that way. That's kind of crazy. But I just want to show you could extrude edges and do it that way. And if we turn everything back on, it looks like it's got some thickness now, right? A little bit. No, it's just got an edge. But okay. So I'm going to undo, get back to just the top. So what we can do is just go back to our old friends, the polygons, because they're tried and true. These edges and points, they're all snooty. So we grab all these guys, and we're going to extrude inner. And we can see, and we talked about normals that first day, and that's what renders. Blue is the back of a normal, and orange is the front of a normal. And if we go in here, we could always turn on normals, and we'll see these little lines. So those are obviously saying, hey, this is the right side of the normal. I'm pointing up. And the blue ones inside are not. They're sad. They're just little dots. So those will drive you crazy if they're on all the time, but there will be times you'll want to turn that on. So I'm going to turn off my normals again. Where were they? Doo, doo, doo. It was option, you're right. Whew. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this guy, and I'll show you what happens. There's some issues with it, but we'll see. So when you've got something like this, we can go ahead and select everything, and then extrude. Oh, that did not work. Okay. So when I did that, I'm getting this craziness. And are you guys getting that too? Create caps will give you a cap from where you're extruding. So when you think about, so that with that on, now it's created that inside bit. So I'm going to undo again, and I'm going to go extrude, select everything, extrude, make sure my create caps is on, and I'm going inside. Now a lot of times, for this it doesn't matter as much because it's just we're eyeballing it, but if you were really trying to match an exact form, I always go inside because I've already modeled the outside. If I go outside, it's going to get a little bigger. Then I could possibly scale it down, but it's not going to be exact and it makes me crazy. So I always model the outside exact and then I'll bring it in. Now one of the things you have to worry about sometimes is if you've got a lot of curves and features that you're not butting up against other things. This is pretty simple, so it should be fine. But once we have it extruded once with the caps, we're fine. I'm going to go ahead and look at this. But the normals are weird, so we're not going to do anything with rendering with this guy now. If I go back to my polygons and look at it, now all my normals are backwards. They're all blue. So it's like it's in the negative world. It's bizarro cylinder. So if I go ahead and have those selected, right-click, you'll see there's a reverse normals. And if we click that, it's solid. So that'll be one thing. And sometimes you'll do things and you'll get the insides will be blue and the outsides will be yellow. So what you can do, you can try and align normals, and that will a lot of times make everything one way or the other, and then you can reverse normals. But sometimes you just have to pick what's going on and then it won't. And let's say we did have to pick this inside. Okay, it looks like it'd be a pain in the butt to pick, right? Trying to paint inside there. Well, what you could do, if we did our old loop tool or in polygons, take the top one, select it, go all the way down to the middle, the bottom. Now, since that's at one point, a loop is going to grab that whole middle, or that whole bottom. So let's shift select that. So we've got a bottom and that, and then there's a cool thing called fill selection. Oh, it's not here though, is it? Select fill selection. I'm not lying. There it is, fill selection, UF, because I always do UF. And then if you shift, we got to remember to shift though, because if you just click, undo, just undo, but then you shift click, and then it fills whatever is in between the selected things you have. So if you have to select different parts, so if you wanted to get, like even if we just needed a band around the outside, so I'm like, oh, I want to get that whole thing. Yeah, you could shift select all these. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many mouse clicks? Oh, crap. Now I got to do over. So this way you can just do 2 clicks. Oh, UF, 3 clicks, boom. You just saved, if you had 17 of those to do, look how much time you saved. You could go get a sandwich. All right, so that's that guy. But if we turn everything back on, now we've got our insides, we've got our subdivision. Click off of this guy. All right, what's going on though? Why is it still a sharp edge? I mean, it sort of looks thick, but what's going on? What do you guys think? Aliens could be. What was up with our wheel when we wanted a sharp edge? What did we have to do with a subdivision surface? When it was soft and we wanted to tighten it up, what did we end up doing? Got to add some more geometry. Where would we want to add geometry if we wanted that top edge to be a little tighter?
Subdivide it or something?
You could do a bevel. You could try and do a bevel with a ring selection. But it, yeah, if we just do a cut up at the top, that should help us out. So if we just do our knife, old friend the knife tool, tried and true, and then do a loop selection. Let's just go up here. Now, one thing though, this is going to only cut the outside. So if we turn on our subdivision surface again, it's okay, but it's still super soft on the inside. So if you want to cut the inside too, you can do a plane select instead of a loop. So if we do a plane, so you've got a line, you can cut a hole in things, or you can do a little and it'll cut a hole, but then a plane. So a plane it'll only be XY, XZ, or YZ. So ground plane is our X and Z, so we do that, and we can see, we can ride around. Now there's two loops, so it's telling us we're going to cut the inside too. So then if you want to do that, click, and you've got your loop there. Hopefully now our subdivision will look like a top. So now if we throw everything on, now we've got our crazy faceted vase.